Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 17th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 34, Dynamite. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Night 3. Katsuki stood off to the side by himself. Not like he had anyone he could really talk to. The extras he tolerated were all too stupid and ended up in extra lessons, and Deku and Todoroki both just left to go have their romantic couple time or whatever the fuck they were doing. He closed his eyes and leaned against the tree. He'd be last and by himself. Good. Let those B-side extras get cocky by scaring the piss out of everyone else. Then bam! King Explosion Murder Dynamite would bust them down. He couldn't wait to switch. He'd happily scare the fuck out of everyone. Okay. Eureka and Ashui next. Mandalay called. The two girls giggled and held hands as they made their way towards the entrance. Round Face looked a bit spooked already. Pathetic. So, Shinsu was next to him. Katsuki actually didn't mind Shinsu for the most part. He was pretty quiet, and it had been super funny when he and Half Face were having a dick measuring contest. Though why they were fighting over Deku of all people he'd never know. Going by yourself. Scared? Katsuki scoffed. Fuck no. That's what I thought. Nice of you to trade with me though. It wasn't out of the goodness of my fucking heart, he said. I hate icy hot and the idea of spending alone time with him makes my skin crawl. Plus Deku is probably in there creaming his pants over every quirk he sees, so it's for the best he has someone to pull him along that wouldn't blow up in 2 minutes. He hummed. I get ya. Yeah, he does tend to go overboard. I made the mistake once of talking about my quirk. He held me hostage for like 2 hours after school to ask me questions. Rookie mistake, Katsuki chuckled. So, was Mito always like that? Like what? Annoying? Hyper-obsessive with heroes and shit? Yes. Shinsu nodded. I guess it's because of his dad. Katsuki frowned. He knew damn well Uncle hadn't come back until way later in Deku's life. He had a quirk obsession before that because he thought he was quirkless. But that was Deku's business, and if he didn't tell Ibags his whole life story, that was his own fault. Something like that, he settled on. Not his circus, not his monkeys. Then again, lying on behalf of Deku and his entire thing with his quirks was probably going to be a regular occurrence. Deku's monkey, his circus so to speak. Okay. Mandalay called. Aoyama and Yaeorozu. Your turn. Shinsu sighed. My turn next. He mumbled, man, this is gonna be awkward. With Tails? He asked. Ojiro was one of the more tolerable extras. What was his problem with Ojiro? He nodded in return. I mind-controlled him at the sports festival. He wasn't happy about it. We haven't really talked it out yet. And Midoriya hasn't forced me to yet either. Katsuki snorted. Just fucking talk to him then. It's not rocket science. Just roll up and say, hey Tails, so I mind-controlled you with my quirk in a competition all about using quirks. Get the fuck over it now, let's go piss our pants and you'll be happy little queers skipping down the forest path. Shinsu laughed. I'll give it a shot. Hey, speaking of queers. You're friends with Kaminari, right? I don't have friends, but yes. He likes to hang around me and I allow him to do so. Right. So, he's a nice guy. A nice guy who likes guys. I'm a guy who also likes guys. And he's cute. And a mim, so, any words of advice for how to talk to him? He stared back at Shinsu. He blinked. He blinked again. What the fuck are you talking to me about this shit for? Well, I talk to Kirishima. He cut him off. They're way closer and Kirishima is a lot more emotionally intelligent than the average person. He'll give you way better advice than I could. Hey, Shinsu said. Thanks Bakugu. You're not such a bad guy aft. Katsuki held up his hand. He'd spotted something. Black smoke was lifting from the trees in the distance. Had someone spooked Icy Hot that badly? No. He was way more in control of his quirk than that. And no one else had a fire quirk. It had to be. Pixie Bob went flying backward toward the trees, her head colliding with a large metal beam. Two people strolled into the light. The first was a tall person holding the metal beam, currently resting the beam so hard on Pixie Bob's head that it crushed her visor. The other was a man with a lizard quirk of some kind. He was dressed in a way that looked like the hero killer. He was right. Villains had found them. Why hello. The lizard greeted. We're here on behalf of the League of Villains. We're the Action Vanguard Squad. Tremble with fear. He gave a broad gesture to them all. We're here to torture, maim, and otherwise kill as many of you brats as we can. The other person laughed. Spinner, should I crush her pretty little skull? They asked before turning to the group. What do you all think? As if I'd. Tiger began, moving forward and getting in position to charge. Calm yourself, big sis Magni. Let's not get too hasty. Holding power over someone's life is everything. It's one of Stain's tenets, Spinner said. Ida growled. A follower of Stain. He spat at him. Right. Ida had been with Deku when they took on the hero killer. Ah yes, Spinner grinned. I remember you. You're one of the brats who took down Stain. He grabbed the large blade on his back. It was huge and looked to be made of several knives and swords hot glued together. Fucking stupid. I'm going to take on his legacy and make his dreams come true. So how about I finish you off? Tiger, I've given the order. Ragdoll will keep the others safe. Class President, get the other students here back to camp. Aizawa and Vlad will protect you, Mandalay ordered. Her face looked worried. Her eyes glanced back toward the woods. Oh. Right. The little brat. He's probably... Tiger jumped into action, as Ida began to lead the class away. Katsuki didn't follow. Bakugu, where are you going? Shinso asked. Mandalay. He called to her, ignoring Shinso completely. She turned. I know where he is. I'm faster than you, so let me get him. Mandalay cursed. Fuck. Okay. Go, but stay safe. Do not engage any villain you find. Bakugu, where are you? Go to Camp Shinsu, he barked. You'll be safe there. I'll be faster alone. Just go, he ordered, and with explosions on his palms, he rushed off toward Koda's secret base. He practically flew through the trees and up the short path he and Deku had just walked the day before. Katsuki forced his body to move at top speed before crashing onto the fray. Koda was standing there, wide-eyed and about to shit his pants. A massive villain was pouncing on him, a gross fist raised and ready to crush the brat into the dirt. Katsuki launched himself forward with a massive explosion. He collided with Koda, wrapping an arm around him. They landed with Katsuki on his back and into a roll. He maneuvered them so he landed in a kneeling position. Katsuki pushed the kid behind him, taking stock of the mean-looking asshole in front of him. The villain was tall, blonde, and missing an eye. Where had he heard that before? Fucking water hose. With the case being on his mind so much because of the brat, he could recall the wanted poster for their killer. That had to be some cosmic joke. How did this freak wind up with the League? Well, now you were on the list. It said dead or alive for you, so I'll just go ahead and say dead. He laughed. Katsuki was alone. He hadn't told anyone where he was. The only person who knew this spot was Deku, and he was probably tied up elsewhere. Katsuki was going to have to take this guy on alone. He could try outrunning him, but with the kid it would restrict his movements. He'd have to kick his ass and keep the kid safe. Though, could he do that? He glanced back at the brat. His eyes were wide with tears. In his mind, those eyes were replaced with a pair of green ones. He'd have to. He stood up, preparing an explosion. Oi, brat, he said. Quit your crying. I'm here. Koda choked back a sob. The villain laughed. Man, you're funny. Saying I'm here like you're fucking All Might. Bakugu, right? Man, I'm gonna have fun taking you apart. I'll torture you real nice. He dropped his cape and activated his quirk. Muscles grew along his body. Fucking gross. They were all pink and exposed. Ew. Show me some blood. He jumped, pouncing down onto Katsuki faster than he was expecting. Katsuki wasn't able to react in time, and he ended up punched in the side of the arm, sending him crashing into the hard rock of the mountainside. Fuck. He cursed in pain. How the fuck did Deku make it look so easy to tank hits like this? Ah wait. Actually. Before I kill you, do you happen to know where the kid named Midoriya is? He asked. We've got a job to do, he grinned. Deku? They wanted Deku? Why would oh shit? The League had seen him use give and take. They knew about his quirk. This was exactly what Deku had been afraid of, even then. He grit his teeth. I'll kill you before you can lay a hand on fucking Deku. He charged forward only for the asshole to punch him directly in the side of the same arm again. He crashed into the dirt. He was pretty sure his left arm was broken after that. And you were here, he laughed. Ah well, I was hoping you'd put up more of a fight. Well, he couldn't have that now, could he? Katsuki was on his feet and in his face in an instant, letting off a massive explosion. The villain was sent back flying in the air. His arm was definitely broken. But he bit back the pain. This was nothing. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Kota or Deku. Muscular stood up slowly. Explosions, hey? Not a bad quirk. But I don't know how it'll stand up against mine. I can enhance my muscles. I'm a perfect power type. Like Deku. He'd fought against Deku's quirk plenty of times. He usually lost, but that was mostly because his teammates were incompetent while Deku was pulling off some Machiavellian scheme. He dove forward again, his palms making contact with his muscles. They hardened under his fingers as his explosions went off. They barely did shit. Muscular flung him away again, and he landed on his back in the dirt. Way too weak, he said. You're pretty pathetic, you know that. He strode towards him. Katsuki hissed. He pulled himself up on his knees. He needed more sweat. Fucking damn it, had to do this, and I was excited too. A rock had gently bonked his head. Kota stood behind him. Crying. Fucking hell, stupid idiot kid. He shouldn't be getting involved. Water hose. He yelled. You killed them, right? Did you torture them too? They were my mom and dad. Seriously? You're the child of water hose? He asked. He turned his back on Katsuki, moving towards Kota. Wow. This must be fate. He leaned down. Water hose gave me this glass eye. You killed them. Kota yelled. He waved him off. I did, but don't pin all the blame on me. I was just doing what I wanted and they tried to stop me. So we all did our best. It's their fault too, he smirked, turning back to face Katsuki. He was already in the air, screaming. Knew you'd go for the... Katsuki let off an explosion. Shut up. Muscular slid across the ground. Gonna beat me up with your weak-ass explosion? You can't do. It's not a matter of can or can't, asshole. He screamed. A hero vows to put their life on the line for those they protect. We fight to the end. I'm dynamite and I don't fucking lose. Explosion after explosion went off in his palms. He grinned as burns began to appear in his muscle fibers. So you do have a burning point. He hissed in pain. I'm gonna have fun smashing you into the ground. He charged forward. Katsuki jumped in time. He landed on his upper shoulders. He placed his hands on either side of his face, bombing the sides of his cheeks. Ah! He screamed. He grabbed him by the already broken arm and threw him. Katsuki smashed into the mountainside face first. He was sure his nose was broken. He pulled himself away from the mountain. He looked back and grinned. His handprints were burned into the sides of Muscular's face. Another face injury. Man, you suck, Katsuki said, rising back on his feet. That was stronger than before, he said. He crashed forward. His entire body weight was coming at Katsuki full speed. He set off explosions in front of him to slow him down, but if this hit connected, Katsuki was going to die. But not strong enough. Fuck. Sorry, Mom, Dad. He hit, but it wasn't as hard as Katsuki expected. His ribs cracked under the weight of his shoulder. But Muscular had stopped. His explosion shouldn't have been strong enough. Oh. Kota stood behind them, his hands wet and extended forward. Droplets of water clung to Muscular's back. The kid had distracted him. This was the only shot. He pulled everything deep inside him. Deku had used the terms of percentages once, so Katsuki visualized 100% no. He was better than that. 1,000,000% explosion. The sound was deafening. Fire practically bloomed under his fingers. Muscular was sent back and over the cliffside. He screamed the whole way down and landed with a loud crash. He pulled himself from the rock and ran to the edge. Muscular was on the ground, several yards below. He'd smashed his head into a tree. He was out cold. "Fuck you!" Katsuki screamed. He'd survived. He'd won. "My hero," Kota whispered, tears still in his eyes. Katsuki rolled his own before grimacing. His left arm hung limply at his side, and blood trickled down his nose. "Come on, brat." He picked up Kota with his right arm and pulled him in close. "I got ya." Kota clung to him the whole way back down the mountain. Running with a child clinging to you while your arm, nose, and some ribs were broken sure was a lot fucking harder than it sounded. Deku broke his arms every other week for a while there. Katsuki wasn't sure how the nerd managed that pain. He had a higher pain tolerance than he gave him credit for. He turned around a tree and his eye met a familiar shape. "Aizawa!" he called. Aizawa looked up, his eyes widening. "Bikugu? What the hell happened to you?" "Not important." Katsuki yelled, "I gotta get back to Mandalay. I've got a message for her," he snarled. "Bikugu, tell me and take Kota back to camp and..." "Bullshit," he growled. "I'm faster than you and we both know it. These villains are not like the ones from the USJ. They don't fuck around." He dropped Kota. "Go with Aizawa, kid," he ordered, then clutched his bad arm. "Take Kota back. I'll get to Mandalay. The villains are after Deku." Aizawa's eyes widened. "Oh. That's not good, I know. They saw him use it at the USJ. I dunno what the fuck they want him for, but fuck, I'm wasting time. Keep Kota safe, I'm going to Mandalay, then I'm finding Deku," he growled and pushed past them. "Bikugu, wait." Aizawa called. "I have a message for Mandalay too. Tell her that everyone should go ahead and use their quirks. Stay alive. Wasn't planning on dying, old man." He yelled back and ran forward. He let go of his arm and began to propel himself forward with his explosions. He had to find Mandalay. Hopefully, they've taken care of the villains by now. They better have fucking extras. Katsuki jumped above the tree line. He could see Mandalay engaged with Spinner. His massive blade swung down towards her. He changed his direction in the air with a small explosion, now falling towards Spinner Die. He screamed, an explosion rippling up the lizard's back. He used his shoulders to flip over him, landing between him and Mandalay. "Oi!" he yelled at her. "Bikugu!" she cried. "Is Kota safe?" he said. His left arm was screaming. Setting off so many explosions on a broken arm was fucking painful. "Listen, I got a message from Aizawa. Everyone in Class A and B should start using their quirks. There might be too many villains for just the pros to handle." Mandalay nodded and Katsuki grimaced at the feeling of her voice in his head. "One more thing," he yelled, already on the move to head into the woods again. "They're after Deku. Make sure he knows." Rage. Aizawa was incensed. Hurt his Shadow? Not on his goddamn watch. He sprang forward, a punch raised. One for all 20%, this asshole was going down. A massive paw struck him out of the air, sending him flying back until he collided with a tree trunk. The air was knocked out of his lungs. He fell down on his ass, his legs sliding right out from under him. His head was spinning, trying to focus on the scene before him. The bear villain swung his huge paw at Shadow. He sent a wave of ice at him, but his razor-sharp claws sliced through it with ease. Shadow hopped back, sending out a blast of fire on his left. To Aizawa's horror, the fire seemed to slide off his fur. It left the top layer singed, but it seemed his hide was fire-resistant. Not good. Shadow raised his right hand, attempting to cage the bear in with ice. He destroyed it with a single swipe. God, he was strong. Aizawa stood up as the beast charged at Shadow again, and this time his claws made contact. Shadow was able to protect himself from part of the hit by covering his body in ice, much like Aizawa did with his shield, but it wasn't enough. He was slammed into the ground, cuts across his chest, and his shirt was in shreds. He was bleeding. Aizawa snarled, his mind going blank. He screamed, pure rage pouring from his lungs as he shot forward like a bullet from a gun, 20% raging through his veins. He jumped into the air above the bear and held out his hands, pulling the bear back into him as he landed a harsh kick in the middle of his spine. His hide was thick. But the bear still gave out under his power, wind pressure blasting past them. Aizawa stood on top of his body. Don't you fucking touch him! He screamed. The bear villain reared back. Izuku grit his teeth, grabbing onto his fur. He wasn't going anywhere. Izuku! Shouto yelled. I'm fine. He screamed back. He said something about a do not kill list. You need to run. Shouto growled, I'm not leaving you. He was bleeding down his chest. Izuku had to end this fight sooner than later, or Shouto was going to get himself killed. If not from the villain, then from blood loss. That's it. Blood. Make me a knife with your ice. He cried. We gotta get this guy to draw blood. Izuku pulled on his fur hard. It was so thick he couldn't even see the skin underneath it. The villain raged, bucking back against him. He dug his feet in, using pull to keep the fur coming towards his hands so that even as his grip slipped he could stay on. He nodded, his right hand forming a large blade of ice. Izuku! He called, and chucked it with all his might. Catch! He cried. The bear lunged forwards toward Shouto. Izuku reached out his right hand, using pull to call the blade towards him. Shouto dodged, using his fire to propel him away from the bear's massive jaws that snapped at him. Now with a blade in hand, he turned it around, and with 20% of one for all he slammed the sword down. It shattered on impact. His fist at least slammed into his back, a harsh crack sounding out under his fingers. The bear roared and bucked back again. Izuku was sent flying, crashing back to the ground. It didn't work. His hide was too strong. He couldn't piece his skin. The villain stood back on his legs and ran at full speed toward Shouto. He was going to kill him. Izuku would die before he let him. His massive paw took another swing, backhanding Shouto into a tree face first. He was dazed, slumped against it. They couldn't break his skin. Fire wouldn't work. 20% wasn't enough. If he didn't figure something out, Shouto was going to die. He grit his teeth, eyes practically glowing in rage. He charged forward again, 20% coursing through his legs. Get away from him! He screamed, letting 100% fill his left arm, punching into the side of the bear's hind leg. His arm shattered on impact, but the bear went flying into the trees, cutting down several of them as he smashed through them. He landed some yards away. Izuku turned to Shouto, who hadn't moved. Shouto! He cried, running to his side. Baby, please, be okay. He said, kneeling down and pulling him from the tree. Shouto leaned back into his arms, eyes glazed over slightly. Shao, he was crying. Please, talk to me. I'm fine. He said, his voice low. Hurt but fine. Your arm, he said softly. Behind them, the villain was standing again. The bear stood up on its hind legs and gave a mighty roar. Izuku turned his body, shielding Shouto behind him. His black eyes narrowed on them. Danger sense coursed through his whole body. The villain was so angry he was going to kill them both. 100% wasn't enough to stop him. If Izuku didn't do something. His nose. There was no time to make a weapon. The bear was charging. He stood, and jumped, his right hand extended. He landed on his snout, laying all 5 fingers on his nose. Sorry. He mumbled as the world faded into the void. All for one swirled around him in his head space. A new quirk joined the tornado of power with him at the center. An animal transformation quirk. The villain shrunk back into a human under him. What did you do? The villain cried out. Shouto gave his arm a gentle swipe, ice coming from him. Izuku jumped out of the way as ice encased the villain. My quirk. Give it back. He cried. Tears welled in his eyes. Izuku only felt annoyed. No, he said, and with his good arm, he punched him in the face, knocking him out cold. He turned back. Shouto was standing, again. Shouto. He ran back to him, cupping his face. Shouto stumbled into him a little but regained himself. I'm fine. I'm okay. He looked down at his wounds. They weren't as deep as Izuku had thought. Relief flooded him. Think I might have cracked a rib, but I'm fine. He said again. So you took his quirk? Only thing I could think to do, Izuku said before kissing him. I just got so angry. I couldn't stand the idea of him killing you. Everyone. Mandalay's voice cut through. You are permitted to use your quirks to fight back against the villains. Stay alive, we are coming to help you. One of the villain's targets had been identified. The student is known as Deku. Did you get that? Deku. Deku should avoid combat and not make any move alone. Shoto gasped, grabbing Izuku and pulling him close. Izuku squeaked. Fuck. He mumbled into Shoto. That explains the do not kill list, damn it. Your quirk. Shoto said. Izuku, don't worry, I won't let them get you. Let's get back to camp. But what about everyone else? Izuku asked. Shoto, I can't just sit by and... He was cut off by a kiss. No. You will. Your arm is shattered, I'm bleeding, and you're a target. I will not let them get you, do you hear me? He asked. We're going back to camp and you're going to be safe even if I have to knock you out and drag you back there, do you understand? Izuku blinked. Shoto wasn't really in a state to fight with his injuries. But neither was Izuku. Okay, he said. Okay, but I think we should. A cry of pain so loud it nearly shook Izuku to his core. Wait, Shoto said. That's Tokoyami. Izuku yelled. It's so dark he must have lost control of dark shadow. Shoto, you can help him. Your fire, he needs light. Shoto cursed. Fuck. Okay. We're going to help Tokoyami and that's it, then back to camp, you understand? Okay. Izuku cried, and the two ran off into the darkness together. Chapter 35, Anguish. Chapter by Roxi2Star. Night 3. Elsewhere. Hisashi stood in the kitchen with the cabinet doors open. A cardboard box was on the counter in front of him, and a stack of newspapers next to it. He grabbed another mug from the shelf and started at it dopily. Izuku's favorite All Might mug. He remembered buying that for him ages ago. He wrapped it in newspaper and put it in the box next to the others. Music was playing softly on the radio. It was getting late. He'd spent the whole day packing. Hisashi felt peaceful. Don't get him wrong, the idea of moving out of his home was still painful. This was the place Inko had built her life. He fell in love with her here. This was where she'd brought him after she found him on the beach that sunny early morning. Their first kiss had been in this apartment. He reminded himself it wasn't forever. The worst case would be just until Izuku graduated and was living on his own. Then Hisashi could move back in and go back to his quiet life. He snorted. Yeah right, he doubted he'd ever live a quiet life. I thought you said you were only packing the important things. Toshinori asked from the archway. He was smiling softly, and wearing clothes that fit his skinny frame for once. I mean, I have plenty of mugs. I know, Hisashi said, but Izuku can just be picky about these kinds of things. He looked down into the box. I know he says he's fine with the move, but he's never lived anywhere but here. I just want to make this as smooth as possible for him. Toshinori approached. That's sweet of you, he said. I think we should go shopping together. The bed I have in my guest room for Izuku is bigger. It's a queen, so we should buy him some new sheets. The ones I have on it are plain. And I doubt he'll sleep well if they aren't All Might themed. Hisashi laughed. No, probably not, he said. He keeps buying merch too. I think it's just a habit at this point. I keep telling him I can give him any piece of my merchandise he wants. He threatened to steal the stuff I already have. That's Izu for you. I think he likes the hunt. Toshinori shook his head as he chuckled. So, I saw the photo album out on the table, he said. How come you haven't packed it yet? He sighed. I got caught up. Some of those pictures are painful to look at. Especially alone. Toshinori took his hand and pulled him out of the kitchen. It's a good thing I am here. He said, puffing himself up for a split second. Hisashi rolled his eyes but allowed him to move him to the living room. They sat on the couch together as Toshinori grabbed the album. I don't think I've seen these pictures, he said. That's because they're from before I came home, he said and opened it to the first page. It had several pictures of Izuku. He looked to be about preschool age in them. There was a very cute picture of him and Katsuki in their preschool uniforms with their arms thrown around each other's necks, both of them smiling wide. It must have been before their quirks manifested. Ah, that's a good one. Think we can convince Katsuki to recreate it? I doubt it, Toshinori smiled. I'm glad they're speaking to each other again, he said. Izuku has been much happier because of it. He nodded. Me too. I used to dislike the kid, but he's really maturing. He's gonna make a great hero someday. He flipped the page. Another picture stuck out to him. This one was of Inko, holding Izuku up while he wore an All Might Halloween costume. She was wearing a matching Sir Night-Eye costume. He let his thumb trace over her form in the photograph. Inko had always had a blinding smile. It was the thing that had first caught his attention all those years ago. Her lovely smile. A smile said a lot about a person. How freely they gave them out, or how big they were, if they smiled with their teeth. Inko had a way of smiling that breathed warmth into Hisashi's lungs. Izuku had the same smile. That bright light that brought happiness wherever it went. He'd spend the rest of his days protecting it. Wish Mirai and I were still on speaking terms, Toshinori said. He'd love this picture. I still think you should reach out, Hisashi said. Based on what you've told me, Night-Eye would love to have you back in his life. I doubt that. I dunno, I always got the impression he loved you, Hisashi said. But then again, you're very easy to love, Toshinori. A faint pink dusted Toshinori's nose. I could say the same for you. It's very easy. He laughed. Aw, come on, no need to lie to make me feel better, Hisashi said. It takes a special kind of person to be able to deal with all my baggage. You're a hero with the world on his shoulders who just smiles right through it. That's easy to love. I'm an ancient serial killer who can't even remember the faces of the people whose lives he's ruined. I'm pretty sure if I had told Inko about all the things I'm sure I've done, she'd never have married me or had a child with me. Not that Izuku was planned, but... Midoriya Hisashi, you have never killed a single person. Toshinori grabbed his hand not once. All for One is an evil person. You are not all for one. You are your own person. A wonderful, hardworking, and kind man. A dedicated single father who has put his entire being into making a good life for his son. You are also the person most dear to me, so please refrain from speaking poorly of yourself. I can't bear it. Hisashi blinked. He rubbed the back of his head with his free hand, pink dusting between his freckles. Oh Tosh, you're making me blush. You're way too good of a person. I dunno how you can stand to look at me sometimes. You deserve to spend your time with someone who's... SHH, Toshinori hushed him. You know. Izuku told me something before he left. I had brushed him off slightly, but... I've been giving it more thought. He cocked his head to the side. Yeah? Izu giving you life advice. He told me I deserve to go after the things I want in life. Hisashi nodded. I agree. You absolutely do. You're a wonderful person and you deserve all the happiness the world can possibly offer you. Toshinori hesitated. There's one large problem, he sighed. Hisashi, I told you about Mirai's prediction, right? You did. Then you know why I can't. There's really only one thing I want. I cannot pursue it as a dead man walking. That would be so cruel to it. Oh. Hisashi wasn't a fool. He rarely admitted it, but he knew his own feelings. He'd been in love with Toshinori for 5 years. Ever since Izuku's 11th birthday, when Hisashi bared his soul to another person for the first time since Inko. He knew he had fallen in love with Yagi Toshinori. Of course, years later, finding out the man he harbored feelings for was All Might, his supposed enemy, though he more saw All Might as the reason he was here. If not for him and that fight, Hisashi would still just be a fragment of All for One's mind. Nothing more than thoughts he locked away. He was also fairly certain that Toshinori loved him back. Don't ask him why, he didn't know. He knew wasn't deserving of someone like Toshinori. Someone so kind and soft. He didn't deserve Inko either. He'd taken her anyway though, and that ended with her death, never mind it was something so out of his control. He couldn't accept that life had presented him with another angel. Toshinori was trying to confess, without confessing. Should Hisashi let him? Should he accept it? Reject it? He wanted him. That he knew. He'd always known, but did he deserve it? Did Inko deserve this? She'd loved him when he was unlovable. She was owed a man who stayed by her side even in death. Is that what she'd want for him though? Not to mention Toshinori was right. His death was a possibility. More than a possibility. Sir Night-Eye's quirk, foresight, was never wrong. Toshinori had confided in Hisashi the truth of his impending death not long after he learned he was All Might. Could Hisashi handle loving and losing Toshinori? To have another taste of happiness only to have it torn away? It was a pain he knew. And one he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. But, he could die any time. They both could. Would it be better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all? Did he regret loving Inko? No. Oh. That was all Hisashi could say out loud. It wasn't a yes, or a no. Simply an acknowledgement. Oh. Simple. What next? What else was there to say? He still hadn't decided how he wanted to answer. Parts of his brain were screaming yes yes yes. Part of him wanted to hide. All of him, however, was frozen on the couch. So, Hisashi, Toshinori said, I don't expect anything, he started. Of course he doesn't. Toshinori never did. He was too good. I'm not even sure if I want something. But I want you to know. And no matter what, you'll still be welcome to live in my home. I can even move out of it if it's too uncomfortable, but you deserve to know before we live together. Toshii Hisashi was cut off by his phone ringing. He checked the time. It was late. Who the hell was calling at this hour? He grabbed his phone from the table. It's Aizawa, he said. How much do you wanna bet Aizawa broke another bone? That made Toshinori laugh. Whatever spell had come over them was broken. I'll say 1,000 yen. Deal, he answered. Yo Aizawa. So how many bones did he break? Aizawa would he know? And with that, Hisashi's world ended. Night 3. Earlier. Training camp. Aizawa ran, keeping stride with Shoto. Mandalay was right. He should try to avoid directly engaging with villains, but Tokoyami needed help. Shoto's fire was one of the only things that could save him. Shoto kept him close and in eyesight as they ran. They passed the spot where Ragdoll was supposed to be, but she was nowhere in sight. Is she okay? Aizawa asked. No, we'll just have to trust that she is, he said out loud, more to himself than to Shoto. We need to focus on getting to Tokoyami. Another pain scream in the distance, then the sound of a falling tree. Shit, Aizawa cursed, we need to move. Shoto nodded. Stay close, he said as they pushed to get to Tokoyami faster. Once again, someone stood in their way. A tall and lanky villain in all black, his hands bound in front of his chest. Damn it, Aizawa cursed, jumping between Shoto and the villain on instinct. The villain turned to them, and Aizawa's heart dropped. Most of his face was covered, and only his mouth was exposed. It was being forced open, his teeth shining in the low light. Flesh, he said, tilting his head toward them. Fuck. Danger sense lit up along the bridge of Aizawa's nose. He threw up his shield as the villain's teeth shot out towards them. Shoto stepped out from behind him, sending a barrage of ice, snapping the large teeth that came after them. What the hell is this freak? Shoto asked as another wave of ice burst from his leg. The villain's teeth sliced through it. And why are all the villains cutting through my shit like it's nothing? He screamed in frustration. Aizawa grunted and dropped his shield. I dunno. We need to be careful. So far they've all been no joke. The villain curled in on himself, whispering darkly. This one seems unhinged though. Aiming to kill, he said, I doubt he's fireproof though. Right, Shoto said, his left side igniting right into blue flames. Help me get closer. I don't want to burn the trees. Aizawa nodded and resummoned his shield. The villain stood back up facing them, teeth shooting out. Aizawa reinforced his shield with one for all, the slow pulsing green of shield solidifying into one solid forest green. The teeth shattered on contact. Perfect, he said. The two of them walked forwards as another attack headed their way. Once again, they broke upon contact. Shoto, now! He cried, and dropped his shield. At once, blue flames shot past Aizawa, obscuring their vision of the villain. It was hot. Almost too hot. He almost breathed a sigh of relief before danger sense alerted him. Teeth came flying through the flames. Aizawa can't put up his shield. If he does, it'll cause Shoto's flames to bounce off it and burn them both to a crisp. Okay. He'll tank the hit. He'll be Shoto's shield. Before he could move, however, an explosion dropped on top of them, shattering the teeth. Found you! A familiar voice cried. Shoto dismissed his flames. The villain was still up, but it singed all over. No good, need more, flesh. Blood. Kikin. Aizawa cried. Kikin landed in front of them. His left arm was purple and swollen, much like Aizawa's. Oh my god, Kikin, what happened? He snarled. The fuck do you think happened, Deku? He asked. A villain obviously. Danger sense. Izuku charged past Kiken and raised his shield blocking the hit of teeth. This guy doesn't stop. Another roar from Tokoyami came from the woods. Close. Very close. Sounds like Tokoyami is heading this way. Is that what that is? Kiken asked. Another barrage of teeth. This time a long crack splintered up his shield. Shit, Deku. Shoto was faster, throwing up a massive thick wall of ice. The teeth dug into it, not able to pierce it all the way through. He's fast, he said softly. The ice wall in front of them quivered as another attack smashed against it. Get behind me, he said to both of them, his left side sparking to life again. Izuku grabbed Kiken and pulled him back. The ice wall shattered as a third attack made contact. Behind the villain, a massive dark shadow had appeared. In front of it, Xiaoji ran. Light. He yelled, we need light. Xiaoto, seeing his opportunity, sent out a massive blast of fire. Xiaoji dodged as dark shadow lunged forward into the villain. The resulting blast was huge. Light filled Izuku's eyes until he couldn't see. He covered his face with his good hand. After a few seconds, there was no more noise. He lowered his arm. Xiaoto was in front of them, his hair a mess, and his shirt little more than singed threads clinging to him. If Izuku weren't fighting for his life, he'd say it was attractive. Beyond Xiaoto, the villain was lying prone, his teeth shattered completely. He was unconscious and covered in burn marks. Xiaoji was off to the side at the tree line, and Tokoyami was on his hands and knees, panting. Dark Shadow was curled up and small under him. Tokoyami. Xiaoji called, running to his friend. Todoroki, Bakugo. We need more light. Xiaoto nodded. Bakugo, don't let Izuku out of your sight, he said and ran towards them, his left hand raised and a flame sitting in it. As he passed he encased the unconscious villain in an icy restraint. Tokoyami, here, he made his fire bigger. Thank you, Tokoyami said quietly. Dark Shadow got smaller, cuddling up to his chest. There, old friend, he soothed. I've got you now. Thank you Todoroki. Izuku strode towards them, Kiken right at his heel. Xiaoji leaned down. You did great, he said softly. I heard you, Todoroki. I thought if I could just lead him to you, you'd be able to help him. He turned back to Tokoyami. Can you stand? He nodded, slowly letting Xiaoji help him up. I'm all right. I just lost control. Now what's going on? Villains, Izuku said. So far we've encountered 2. And I've encountered 3 more. Making it 5, Kiken corrected. Mandalay and Tiger are fighting too at the entrance to the loop. I took on a power type while rescuing Koda, he said. Deku is their main target though, so we have to get this asshole back to the base camp before his savior complex kicks in. He placed his hand on Izuku's head to reinforce his point. Izuku frowned. Hey, he sighed. I mean you're right but damn. Deku, use that fucking brain, he said. How should we play this? He bit his lip, holding his chin with his pointer and thumb. You should make a circle arrangement around me, he said. With the 5 of us, we're a pretty killer combination, so anyone who attempts to go after us will have a hell of a time doing it. Xiaoji in front since he has the best scouting and most coverage if we're attacked that way. Tokoyami in the back so Dark Shadow can handle any surprise attacks and watch his back. Then Kiken and Xiaoto on either side of me. If we're attacked one of you can charge forward while the other stays behind. Plus you'll both want to be close to Tokoyami in case he loses control again. That's a solid plan, Xiaoto said, and took his good hand. I won't let go. He brought Izuku's hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I promise I will keep you safe. Kiken took his post on the other side. We're not gonna let them get you, nerd, he said. Tokoyami took his spot, and Xiaoji his. Let's fucking go. We should cut through the trees to avoid the fight where Mandalay and Tiger are. One of the villains has some kind of magnet quirk I think. I don't know how it works really but it's bad news. The 5 of them walked together for a while. They passed the bear villain, who was still knocked out and encased in ice. Jesus, Xiaoji said, he looks messed up. He deserves it, Izuku gritted out. He wanted to eat Xiaoto. Xiaoto squeezed his hand. Something he said has been bothering me. Someone named Dabby, I think? He didn't want me dead. That's right. He did say that. Why? Who was this Dabby person? He called him ugly, so maybe we'll know him when we see him. He sighed. Still. It makes me nervous to think someone would want anything to do with you. You don't think it's someone with a grudge against Endeavor? Possible, Shadow said darkly. Ugh, if I get killed because of that bastard. Relax, Kakin said. Neither of you are going anywhere. He kept his eyes forward. Fuck, the adrenaline is starting to wear off. How the fuck do you go around with your bones broken all the damn time? Izuku gave a quiet laugh. Got used to it, he said, but my pain tolerance has always been high. Hazard of having a guy who explodes as a best friend. They were getting close to the exit. The group moved into the trees, but a noise up ahead of them got their attention. A fight. What's that? Izuku asked. It's... One of Shaoji's arms turned into an eye. Yurika and Azui. They're in a fight with a villain. Okiko. Izuku asked, dropping Shadow's hand in panic. We'll save her, don't worry. Shadow gave him a nod as they all ran forwards towards the fight. Izuku's world went dark. We'll save her, don't worry, Shadow said and gave Izuku a nod. Izuku offered a warm smile right back as the group hurried forward. Yurika. He yelled. Todoroki-chan. Azui called back. She was pinned to a tree by a knife in her hair, while Yurika had the villain pinned. Guys! She cried. The villain under Yurika groaned. That's too many. She pushed Yurika off her with a burst of strength. And I don't feel like dying. Bye Oka-chan, bye Tsu-chan. She called and skipped off into the woods. Wait! Yurika yelled. Damn it, we never found out her quirk, she cursed but ran to Azui and pulled the knife out, letting her down. Are you okay, Tsuyu-chan? She asked her. I'm fine, Kuro. Are you alright, Okiko-chan? She asked her friend. Shadow sighed in relief. We should keep moving. We're heading back to camp. The four of us are guarding Izuku. Shadow turned to grab Izuku's hand again, but he wasn't there. Bakugo stared back at him, eyes wide. Tokoyami was gone as well. Yet I heard Mandalay say Deku was a target, but where is he? Yurika asked. His head whipped around to where he had been standing. Izuku was gone. Panic flooded Shadow's entire body. Izuku! He yelled into the woods. He was right here. Looking for Midoriya. Izuku? A voice asked. Shadow's eyes shot to the trees above them. A villain stood on a branch gracefully. He wore a trench coat and a top hat with a mask. In one hand he held a cane. In the other were two small blue capsules. I took him with my magic. He held the capsules up. The bird was a bonus, but here Midoriya is, safe and sound. The Shadow Man of the underworld wants a few words with him, you see, so we'll have to take him. Shadow growled deep in his chest. His left side lighting itself ablaze with blue fire. Give him back, he snarled. Before you're nothing more than a fucking scorch mark. The villain chuckled. Give him back? You say that as if he belongs to you. Midoriya here is a young man with a big destiny, it seems. We're just here to provide him with all his options before he settles down. He pocketed the capsules. Now, I must be going. I'm more of an entertainer than a fighter, you see. Shadow held out his right hand, creating a ramp of ice and running up it as fast as his body would allow. The sound of feet on ice and explosions behind him sounded like his classmates were following behind. Give him back! Shadow screamed as he kept making a path forward. His left side burned hot as he shot a blast of fire at the villain. He jumped over it with grace, before touching the side of his head. I have the target. Meeting at the rendezvous. We leave in 5 minutes. Being pursued by 5 students. Shadow shot another blast of fire. 5 very angry hero students who keep shooting fire at me. Bakugo was at his side. His pain must have caught up with him. He was only able to use one hand to boost his speed. Shadow leaned forward, his vision blurring with rage and tears. He was crying. Izuku was right there in that asshole's pocket. He would not be allowed to escape with him. He was going to protect him. He had promised. He wouldn't be able to survive without Izuku anymore. He'd changed Shadow too deeply. A life without Izuku would be a life without reason. Izuku, who had come into his world and shattered every icy wall he'd built around his heart with a smile. He was going to save Izuku or die trying. He loved Izuku. Once he had Izuku back in his arms, he was going to tell him. It would be the first thing he said once this was all over. The masked villain jumped down from the trees into a clearing. There were other villains there. The girl that Eureka had been fighting, a lizard, a tall villain holding a metal column, a man in a black and white spandex suit, and a man in a long black trench coat covered in scars. That one, the one with the scars, looked up as the masked man dropped down. Shadow was the first to jump. He used the fire from his left side to boost him forward ahead of Bakugo as he smacked into the masked villain in midair. They landed hard, with Shadow standing on his back. "Give me Izuku!" he screamed, his left side blazing. His fire was so hot it had all turned blue. From his skin to his ends. Burning with rage. Bakugo landed beside him. Xiaoji, Eureka, and Azui landed as well, all getting into their own fights. Shadow wasn't concerned with that. His mind focusing on the villain under him. Bakugo reached into his pocket searching for the capsules. The villain with the scars ran towards them. "I got ya, compress," he called as blue fire poured from his palms. "Find Izuku. I'll protect you," he told Bakugo. He screamed as his fire extended from his left hand, meeting the villains in the center. Behind him, Bakugo pulled out the capsules, breaking them in his hand. All that came out were rocks. "Where's Izuku?" A scarred fist connected with his face through the flames. The villain was right up on him. The masked villain scrambled out from under Bakugo. "No, you fucking don't!" He yelled, a large explosion going off at his palms. He grabbed the villain by the face mask. "Oh, sorry, a magician never reveals his tricks," he said as Bakugo practically blew off his mask. With his face exposed, he smiled and stuck his tongue out. 2 blue capsules sat on it. Shadow cried in rage and delivered a fiery kick to the scared man in front of him, aiming right between his legs. "Oh fuck!" he cried out, falling to his knees. What fucking hero goes for a ball shot? Shadow pushed past him, running at top speed. Ice poured from him, a well-aimed shot smashing compress in the face. The capsules popped. Izuku and Tokoyami fell to the ground on either side of compress. Tokoyami was out cold, but Izuku sat up, wobbling slightly. "Izuku!" Shadow cried, trying to run to his side. Black misty portals opened. Some of the villains jumped into them, getting away from their fights. "Magni!" the scarred fire user yelled, "Grab the kid!" The tall villain holding the metal beam flipped the beam around. Izuku had gotten up onto his knees, his body glowing blue. His entire body was flung into the beam, his head slamming into it. Blood poured from his temple. He slurred, his eyes glazing over. "Deku! Izuku!" Shadow screamed, forcing his body forward. Blue fire blasted him back. The fire user shot past him, grabbing compress and throwing him into a portal. "Sorry, Todoroki Shadow," he said. He had reached Izuku and Magni. He grabbed Izuku by the front of his shirt. He hung limply in his grasp. "Let's meet again," he said, and pulled Izuku into the mist. Shadow ran forward, his entire body burning bright from the inside out. The portal was right there. But just as he reached it, it vanished. All that was left in the clearing were himself, Bakugo, Eureka, Tokoyami, Xiaoji, and Azui. The villains had escaped. They took Izuku with them. He'd failed. This was what Izuku had feared above all else. Shadow had promised. He'd promised he'd protect him. That the League would never touch him. And he'd failed. What was the point of him then? Why was he here if he was just going to fail? Izuku was gone. Tears spilled from his eyes, the world was spinning. People around him were talking, but Shadow wasn't listening. All he could hear was his own fire crackling and his own heart pounding in his chest. He grabbed at himself, leaning forward until his head hit the ground. He screamed. Pure anguish. Shadow had endured pain his entire life. His father had beat him until his skin had turned blue and yellow. He'd been starved as a way to build tolerance. He'd frozen and burned. His own mother had called him a monster as she poured boiling water on his face. His father had told him over and over he was weak and was wasting his own potential. He'd lost his brother. He'd been stabbed, beaten, bruised, burned, all of it. Nothing hurt as bad as this. The thought that Izuku's beautiful smile might be lost to him forever. He could smell burning. The grass around him was on fire. He didn't care. He clutched at the scorched earth, letting out every scream that found its way to his throat. His body burned until the fire turned white. Until it turned cold. He sat there burning, freezing, screaming, and crying until he couldn't. Until his eyes ran dry. Until his throat was hoarse from overuse. Until the fire was put out. His quirk had been deactivated. Distantly his mind thought it must be Aizawa. He couldn't bring himself to care. He lay there in the dirt, burned clothes clinging to his skin. Only one thing on his mind. Repeating over and over like a cruel taunt. Aizuka was gone. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Hope you enjoy the cliffhanger, cuties. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.